In my last video, I talked about the importance of taking time, especially when you're dealing with racism, microaggressions, blatant disrespect, or just the daily stress that fills us with silent rage, righteous indignation as Black women. I talked about the importance of going to God first. I spoke about the power of processing those emotions in prayer, crying, yelling, weeping if necessary, just really pouring out the truth of how you feel before going into a conversation with someone who may have hurt you. And today I want to share the actual neuroscience behind that and why prayer before those tough conversations actually works. So here's the truth. When we're hurt, when we feel dismissed, overlooked, or disrespected, especially in racially charged or gendered situations, our first instinct is often to hold it in. Or for those of you who lean toward getting into fight mode, your first instinct may be to explode. So we either try to pretend that we're unbothered or keep it cute on the outside when we're really crumbling and breaking down on the inside, or we blow up in the moment and say things that we know we're later going to regret because we're so raw, we feel so unseen, so disrespected, and we're so hungry for validation. But the thing is, when we go to God first and we get raw with Him, when we say to Him, God, I feel like that situation was unfair. I was disrespected. I wasn't treated right. That hurt me. I'm tired of this. I'm angry at this injustice. That's not weakness. That's emotional regulation through spiritual intimacy. And here's the neuroscience that backs it up. So what's happening in your brain when you pour out your emotions to God first, when you pray first? Well, to begin, you're calming your amygdala. This is your emotional alarm system. When we feel attacked or disrespected, the amygdala, it goes into high alert. It goes into that fight or flight or freeze or fawn mode. But when you take time to name your feelings out loud, especially in prayer, your prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain that's responsible for thinking, logic, decision-making, begins to calm the amygdala down. Just the act of saying, God, I felt disrespected. I felt ignored. I felt unseen. I did not deserve to be treated that way. It helps to shift your brain from reaction mode into reflection mode. This is why you feel so much more clear when you vent to a friend or a close confidant, or you pour out your heart to God. Doing this literally resets your brain. So that's the first thing that happens. When you take your justifiable rage, your righteous rage, your anger to God first in prayer, before having the direct conversation with the person who may have hurt you or committed the microaggression or the offense. Secondly, the neuroscience that backs this up is that when you go to God in prayer first and you get it out and you pour it out, you complete the stress cycle. Because emotions are not just mental, they're physical. When you cry, when you yell, when you rock. I remember as a little girl seeing my grandmother. She would sit in her chair and she would rock and she would sing. When you do these things, yelling, crying out, rocking, breathing, or journaling in God's presence, you are releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline from your body. You're completing what neuroscience calls the stress response cycle. If you skip this process and hold it in, your body stays stuck in that heightened state. And that's what leads to burnout, resentment, or physical symptoms like fatigue and headaches and tension and other chronic diseases. And then third, when you're pouring out your heart to God before you're going into these tough conversations, you create internal validation before you seek external conversation. When you've already been heard and held and comforted by God, you don't walk into that meeting or that conversation or that relationship looking for someone else to validate your emotions. You don't walk in desperate for that other person to say, you know what, you were right, or I'm sorry, or I understand that shouldn't have happened. You're not desperate for them to say it. If they say it, that's good. If they don't, you're at peace with it because you've gotten it all out and you've already been comforted by your Creator. You've already been affirmed by your Creator in that time that you took to go to Him in prayer. And so when you pour out your heart to God, what you're doing is you're putting your nervous system in a state of peace, not panic, not fight mode, not flight mode, not fawn mode, when you're going into those tough conversations. So instead of emotionally spiraling, if you get dismissed by that other person or if that person attempts to gaslight you, you can say, this is what happened. This is how it made me feel. This is what I want, and actually name what you want or desire from that person if there is something that you want. And regardless of how they respond, you can be at peace. And that's real power going into a conversation. Very few times are you going to feel powerful after a conversation when you just spiraled and yelled and went off on somebody. It provides a very temporary relief. And when I say temporary, I mean seconds, because oftentimes you regret it. You regret the things you said. You regret how you came across. You regret that you lost your cool. And on the flip side, you're not just holding it in, not saying anything. But like I said before, you're pouring out your heart to God. You're being very honest and raw with God, letting God comfort you, letting him affirm you. You're allowing your nervous system, your emotions to be regulated so that when you actually have the direct conversation, you're having it from a place of power, not a place of desperation, not a place of needing somebody to validate your emotions, so that if they do try to gaslight you, it has very little, if any, effect on you because you're already solid in your position. You're not looking for them to validate your lived experience. So again, just to recap, I want to be clear. Suppressing your feelings to keep the peace, that's not strength. It's storage. And when you suppress your emotions and you don't say anything, you can guarantee that your body's going to hold it and remember it. And that's what causes so much chronic illness, especially with us as Black women. Some of the things that we're going through, the high blood pressure, hypertension, the pre-diabetes, the diabetes. Yes, some of it has to do with your diet, but some of it has to do with the constant stress that you're carrying in your body because you don't have an outlet, you don't have a release for righteous, justifiable rage. But then on the flip side, for those of you who are committed to definitely not remaining silent, and you're probably quick to go off and to explode and to crash out, in that moment of deep emotional pain, you know that the crash out has the potential to really sabotage you. It can sabotage your credibility amongst the person that you're in relationship with, your coworkers or whatever, especially in environments where we know Black women are already painted as being too angry or too emotional. So this process of pouring out to God first, getting ugly, yelling, sobbing, being honest about the injustice to God, that's where the emotional detox happens. That's where you can regain your balance, emotionally regulate. That's where you hear the Holy Spirit remind you, you're not crazy, you're not weak, you're not alone. So you're not looking for that validation when you go into the hard conversations. And what I can say honestly is that every time that I have done this, every time that I have cried out to God first before confronting or having a direct conversation with someone, he has met me there. And when I walked into those conversations, I wasn't begging to be seen. I wasn't begging to be heard. I had already been seen and heard by my Creator. So I didn't need that type of validation from another human being.